Chapter 9. Might Makes Right. Friday, November 6th, 1981. Ms. Alexander preferred hands-on learning, so Friday afternoon field trips were periodically part of their class's academic experience. Today they were taking an hour-long trip to a storage unit in the neighboring city of Gresham to see the artifacts amassed by the Pioneer Historical Society. Velia sat next to Ms. Alexander at the front of the bus to preempt any attempt by Roger to intimidate her. Their final showdown was now 1 week away. Velia turned to her teacher. "What are we going to see?" "They have a couple of covered wagons and a lot of Indian tools like scrapers and arrowheads. They also have more modern things like pistols, lighters, pocket watches, and wind-up phonographs." "Phonographs?" Velia puzzled. "They're old record players." Velia grinned from ear to ear. "Kevin said your training is going great." "He told you?" "He did. He also said you're progressing much faster than he expected. Faster than anyone else he's seen." The indirect compliment radiated warmth from Velia's belly to the rest of her body. "Why did you start training with Kevin?" Ms. Alexander rubbed her skirt as she formulated an answer. "Do you know the difference between a normative statement and a positive statement?" "No," Velia admitted. "I had an economics professor in college who taught me the difference. A normative statement is one you want to be true. It's how you think something should be. A positive statement is the opposite. It's what something actually is based on empirical evidence, free of your values or desires. It's a critical distinction, but many people convolute the two." Velia squinted. "I don't understand." "You and I wish the world were a fair place, where size or gender doesn't matter. But that's a normative statement, not how it actually is. Have you heard the phrase, might makes right? It's from that butt-pirate historian Thucydides." "Velia!" Ms. Alexander chided. "That's inappropriate." "I read that Greek men had sex with teenage boys," Velia pushed back. "You know that it's true." "When did you become so aggressive? Those were different times, and it wasn't universal among all Greek people. More importantly, you shouldn't judge a past culture with your own modern standards." Patricia took a deep breath. Thucydides was pointing out that in this world, power determines what society says is right. "What does this have to do with you and Kevin?" "I train with Kevin because while I hope the world will change, I can accept it for what it is at the moment. Do you understand?" The bus came to a stop before Velia could answer. A freestanding 2-story cinder block structure loomed before them, its double-wide roll-up door open. The sunlight made it difficult to see into the shadows of the building's interior, but Velia spied tables and the distinct white canvas of a covered wagon. Ms. Alexander stood up and instructed the students on how to behave before leading them off the bus and into the makeshift museum. A portly older man with short silver hair and a slow canter to his movements greeted them. "Class, please say hello to Mr. Cherrick."
"Hi, Mr. Cherrick,"
the 24 kids shouted in unison.
"He's been kind enough to share this incredible collection with us," Patricia continued. "Mr. Cherrick is a retired school teacher who turned his passion for antiquing into a mission to save our local history."
"Thank you, Ms. Alexander," the older man said. "I'm kind of a pioneer myself, having moved to the Pacific Northwest from Omaha many years ago."
Roger raised his hand, but didn't wait to be called on before speaking. "Did you come in one of these wagons?" The kids closest to him giggled. Mr. Cherrick grinned.
"I'm not quite that old, son."
Ms. Alexander restored order.
"Could you explain where each of these pieces came from?"
"Sure."
The elderly man cleared his throat.
"How many of you kids have been to an antique shop with your parents?"
A few of the children raised their hands, Velia included.
"That's where most of these pieces came from. Others are from secondary stores, and every so often we'll find something at a yard sale. Regardless of where we get them, this collection is important because these are relics of our collective past. Remember, children, this is a kinesthetic museum, so you're welcome to touch any of the pieces that interest you."
Mr. Cherrick turned the kids loose to explore the dusty storage facility. Over the next 2 hours, Velia carefully examined the artifacts, especially the phonographs. But she suffered tunnel vision when staring at a series of petroglyphs chipped into a large rock. The scene seemed to depict a group of people standing with their arms raised toward a circular object in the sky above them. Velia wrote this off as a trick of her imagination, a result of Janice's UFO story earlier in the week, and moved on to the modern artifacts. It was fascinating to see their past on display, Velia thought, pausing to view an old-timey flintlock Beretta pistol when Roger snatched it off the table and pushed it against the side of her head. Instinctually, she twisted her upper body, moving out of the line of fire, and ripped the weapon from his hand, like Kevin had taught her. Roger repeatedly blinked, unable to process what happened. Velia was equally surprised, and set the gun down before walking away and climbing onto a covered wagon. Roger stalked her from a distance, conversing with his crew while spying on her through the corner of his eye.
My dad's taking me to the Trailblazers game tonight.
Wicked, replied one of the other boys.
Courtside tickets,
Roger proclaimed at full volume for Velia to hear.
That's one of the benefits of having a father.
Who are they playing? Asked another boy. Roger stared directly at Velia and said,
The Utah Jazz.
2 more minutes, Ms. Alexander warned. Roger picked up a cavalry sword and was about to move on Velia when Mr. Cherrick stepped between them.
Did you know that the recession in the timber industry is having a big effect on the antiques market?
What? Roger winced.
See, Georgia Pacific came to Oregon because they wanted the hardwood. When that disappeared, moved to the Philippines. None of the other developing nations will deal with them now because they raped the forest there for over a decade.
Roger tried to push past Mr. Cherrick.
Move, old man. When they couldn't get the hardwood to make their furniture in big volumes anymore, they started manufacturing toilet paper. Can you believe that?
I don't care, Roger barked.
You should,
said the retired teacher, still dancing in place with Roger.
Deforestation isn't the biggest threat to the antiques market nowadays. You know what is? Computers.
Roger managed to move past him, but Velia had made it to safety beside Ms. Alexander on the bus. He glared at Velia as he lumbered down the aisle while Mr. Cherrick waved graciously from the edge of the storage unit. If she was doing the calculations correctly, they'd make it back just in time for the final school bell. And if Roger had been speaking truth to his supplicants, she'd have the entire evening at the arcade to practice in peace. Velia slept for most of the ride back and had to run to catch the public bus that took her to the Malibu Grand Prix. When she arrived, Kevin was missing. An American Express commercial played on the television, coaching her to not leave home without it. Velia scoffed at the irrelevance of the advertisement and headed for the back office. Kevin wasn't there either. She removed her jacket, then walked to the back patio overlooking the track where Kevin was pushing a broken go-kart.
Need my help?
Velia shouted. Kevin waved her off, so she returned to the front desk and pulled a few quarters from the register's tray. Free games were becoming the second-best perk of the job, slightly behind having Kevin for a boss. 3 kids a few years older than Velia huddled around Polybius, but when the one playing crashed his craft, the trio made space at the controls. She dropped in a quarter, stuffing the others into her pocket, and began a calculated ascension through the game. She wasn't sure how many levels Polybius had, but she'd made it to level 10 on a few occasions that week. Rumors were circulating about a mythical level 13. Velia was only a minute into the gameplay when her craft crashed into a geometric obstacle. The unanticipated defeat sent her blood boiling, and she hit the plexiglass screen cover.
Take a chill pill,
Kevin commented on her uncharacteristic act of anger.
You break it, you repair it.
Sorry, Velia replied, leaning down to feed the machine another piece of metal. Kevin bribed her spectators with a handful of quarters and sent them off to other games.
What gives? That was a very Roger move of you.
I'm nothing like that savage.
Velia chuckled at her pun.
That's true. Right now. But if you keep feeding this newfound rage, you'll become what you hate in life.
And what's that?
A pinball in someone else's game. Bouncing out of control and mindlessly reacting to every bad event life brings you.
That's what Roger does? Kevin nodded.
Yes. How are you so sure? I know more about him than you might realize.
Velia didn't look away from the screen, but her split attention got her killed just the same. She fed the machine without reacting. Kevin waited for her to ask another question, but when none came, he started his exposition.
I've known Dale Savage since Reed College. He's the kind of guy that makes you question fate because everything works out in his favor. I don't think he's ever suffered a setback in his life. The school had a long tradition of shunning fraternities, but he ran an unofficial one with impunity from the residence hall. He'd throw huge parties that made the Ren Fair celebration look like a grade school field day. Everyone in power looked the other way.
Was he already rich at that point? Velia probed.
Not at all. His father worked in the timber mills. Blue-collar guy. Still, Dale could get away with murdering someone in broad daylight if he had wanted. Never understood why.
Velia blasted away at the game. So that's where Roger gets it?
I'm not telling you this to excuse Roger's behavior. He's making choices he'll pay for. But Dale is a terrible father. In more ways than one.
Velia raised an eyebrow. Are you really one to judge? Kevin's pain reflected off the plexiglass.
You don't need kids of your own to recognize when someone else is damaging their child. Dale has a sadistic side, and I saw it at Reed. There were whispers about abuse.
I never witnessed anything, or I'd have intervened. But if they were true, and I suspect they could be, Dale did it behind closed doors. Given how terrible Roger is turning out to be, I'd say the abuse has continued inside of Dale's home.
I'm supposed to feel sorry for that cretin? Kevin ran his fingers through his thin hair.
Having compassion isn't the same as feeling sorry for someone.
They seem pretty similar to me.
An act of compassion can be as healing for you as it is for someone else. Pity never has that effect.
Kevin patted Velia on the shoulder and returned to the register. Kevin's comments caught her off guard, and she lost another craft. Velia took a deep breath before fishing another quarter from her pocket. His appeal to compassion made it hard to concentrate on the game. She was trying to master Polybius for the purpose of personally destroying Roger. Hour after hour, the crowd around her grew larger, but she repeatedly died before reaching the 10th level. Frustrated, she ceded the controls to someone else and walked outside. The sun had set long ago, so she didn't see the men dressed in black suits moving through the parking lot until they were feet from her face. Startled, she moved for the door, but their odd appearance stopped her. They were dressed like characters from the Blues Brothers movie, with the same hats and blackout sunglasses. Focus on the boys. The target will be 12 or 13 at the oldest, one of the men said as the group blew past her and into the arcade. Velia pressed up against the window, observing one man flash a golden shield mounted to a black leather wallet at Kevin, who then made an announcement to the crowd. Whatever he said sent a few of the patrons sprinting for the exits, setting off a wave of panic. Some kids and adults poured out the door, while others funneled toward the back patio to escape across the track. The men in black stood calmly amidst the chaos. Once the arcade was empty, Velia opened the front door, but Kevin held up his hand to signal her to stop. She backed away and watched through the glass as the men paced throughout the building, occasionally stopping to inspect a machine, until they all converged on Polybius. One went around the back. He was crouching near the rear access panel with some kind of gadget in his hand. After a few tense moments, the men tipped their hats at Kevin and left, once again blasting past Velia, and faded into the darkness on foot. Velia entered the arcade. What was that about?
I told you the hammer was coming. They're federal boys, here to make sure we're not running counters on the games.
What are counters?
Devices that hook up to the arcades for gambling.
Velia huffed at the absurdity. Did you ask them about the camera thing we found?
They weren't the talkative types.
What did they want with Polybius? Kevin shrugged.
Your guess is better than mine.
Velia walked around to the back of Polybius, but its access door had a lock on it. Although this wasn't common, some of the cabinets did include extra security features. She hurried to the register and retrieved one of their skeleton keys for opening the arcade coin slots, but that didn't work. Her frustration was rising. She grabbed her toolkit from the back office, but nothing she tried could open the panel. After wiping the sweat from her brow, she threw down her tools.
I think it's safe to say no one will be coming back tonight,
Kevin admitted, turning off the lights.
Help me lock up, and I'll give you a ride home.